So I have no problem with evolution.
But do you believe that we and chimps used to have a common ancestor that split at some point throughout history? Because a lot of people, when I speak to, that are very religious, but without critical thought, just pure belief.
Because Allah specifically says that we created Adam with our own hands. We know that this was a different type of creation to other things.
Yeah.
We don't deny evolution, so 99.99% of evolution we have no issues with at all. But just a human being we believe is exception. Science is the only route to knowledge.
Yes.
Which is fundamentally
Give you a shot.
because there are many things that science cannot establish. So
Yet.
no, can't establish. Let's take something simple.
Okay.
Pain. Does pain exist? But how do we assess pain?
Well, today by inflammation to a certain degree and by feelings.
We ask someone,
Yeah.
Are you in
how
pain?
much pain are you in?
Between 1 and 10.
And I've seen people who've come in with a broken leg and they've been walking on it for 2 weeks, and someone with a paper cut and rolling around on the floor like they've been shot, you know. And so it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Doesn't the Quran say that Adam was formed out of mud?
Clay.
Clay, dust.
Yeah.
It mentions this
So
sort of
would
thing.
you say that, or would you say that we have evolved from other beings?
So we'll come to this. So if you look at let's get this concept right. So that first of all, if you look at the human beings, we have this brother here, dark skinned, tall gentleman. We have this brother here, brown skin, slightly shorter.
Short.
We have yourselves, tall and fair. If you went to Norway, they would be above 7 foot. The Djibouti tribe in Africa, everyone's above 6'4".
Yeah.
All
That's
these different types of human beings.
Yeah.
But they can't all look like Adam alayhi salam because he was one person. So intuitively we know that from the time of Adam to now there has been a change within the species. We know this, right? Why? Because of the variety. So that's an evolution within the species that we can accept, there's no problem. The difference is that we don't believe Adam alayhi salam himself was an evolved from a common ancestor. Because why? We have something that we've established using our rational logic to come from the Creator, the Quran, which specifically says, "I created Adam with my own hands." So we know there was no precursor to this creature. So the question then comes: how do we deal with the theory of the human evolution? Isn't it? That's the question then.
Brother, can I ask you a question here? Because I had this discussion with her. It's basically trying to fit the puzzle of evolution, even if some things are actual facts, like actual fossils coming out or whatever, or they're some kind of like like some kind of flawed theory that hasn't been proven through the sciences. Okay, and that's why I started my question with whether Sayyidina Adam was in a heaven or not, or like not the heaven that we're that we're promised to go to, right? Inshallah, like. If who's to say, right? Because some of the theories of science say, okay, all of these creatures, even they came out of potentially like a unicellular organism that started. I'm not too like. Okay, but let's say that something in this world kind of rewinds back to that point, and from it something came. Let's say some kind of science was discovered through like new studies moving forward. Who's to say? I'm just trying to say.
Of course.
I don't know.
Don't
right?
worry. Just say your question.
Yeah, my question is like, who's like
caveating?
Maybe maybe the creation of Adam and the Homo sapiens happened in a way that the specifics of it we don't understand. We don't know. Maybe the creatures were born on a planet, and God was created the planet, and the concept of time and space again, is not necessarily what time and space for us today is. Maybe it was a bit faster or slower or whatever, right? To what today's happening, right? Because that also it fits in line with astronomy, right? The speed of Earth going around itself is not constant with time. If we look back light years back, okay? So Adam maybe is a creature. Maybe we started off with a creature, and then the power of that creature becoming a human being consciousness was that moment where, the whole.
I understand.
Maybe it's like that. Maybe it's something different. Does it affect us? It doesn't affect us, right? And that's like we always have this discussion that it doesn't affect us. But I'm not. My counter argument to evolution usually is that okay, if we came from the same creature, why did we divert and why did it not divert? One, two is. Why do we as human beings have choice, but animals have have instinct instead of and that's like a critical difference for me. And so it kind of fits in line with the whole story of Adam as well, right? Because he had choice to do something right, something wrong, etc. So I mean, if evolution, does it really affect or does it not affect?
So evolution has no bearing on whether or not God exists, or it has no.
I mean that my idea, right?
There's an issue, and the issue is. Some things are clear cut, and some things are ambiguous.
What I just said, is it something that might have happened?
So, the clear cutness is that we're told that that Adam was a special creation. This is clear.
Yeah.
Now, the reason the difficulty comes is because we have this theory of evolution, which is based upon the assumption that everything that we have has to be explained naturally. You can't have a non-natural explanation.
Okay, exactly.
We share 99% of our DNA with a mouse.
So we mice.
Yeah, so what?
But the thing is with evolution is that, and this is not a belief, you can take the DNA of all species and you can make a phylogenetic tree and trace it back.
I'll come to this. So there's lots of errors. There's lots of we need to look at the paradigm that people use to come up with these statements. Really, it's really important to do that. We share 50% of our DNA with bananas. But the question is, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything in the big context of things. But let's start with the basics.
Because it could be that's like the default programming language that God used to create everything. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah, you're right.
And which is DNA, right? And so there could be similarities.
But it is the basic code of life. But then if we get a child, the child is going to have 50% of my DNA and 50% of his DNA. Their children are going to have 25, and so on.
You know why I'm asking this question?
DNA is a language that you cannot... It cannot be ignored.
What I'm saying to you is that similarity doesn't necessitate that there is a. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're right.
I'm interrupting you.
I'm trying to build. So, because it's really important. Because when we jump,
I'm not good at that.
No, you are.
No, it's
so
true.
what I'm saying is, so even in evolution, because we have a naturalist worldview, there is an assumption within this, and there are some unfalsifiable assumptions within evolution that exist that lead to only one interpretation of the data available. I'll give you an example. What's the key underlying premise of evolution? You've said it,
Natural
right?
selection.
No, so that's the mechanism, but an assumption of the evolution. What it is? What is the assumption? Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
Your water. You're right.
What is it?
You mentioned that you only said it. So you're not allowed to.
Anyway.
So the underlying assumption in evolution is that everything comes from a common ancestor.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mean? Yeah.
That's an assumption.
Yeah. True.
And it's unfalsifiable.
Is it?
It's unfalsifiable.
Okay. Fine. Okay.
So let's do the experiment. So any piece of data that we get, say if we find, let's say we find a fossil that doesn't fit any of our trees that we've made.
Yeah.
Because these trees that we make are just us and interpreting the data and putting on a tree because we assume that everything has a common ancestor.
Yeah.
There's other ways to interpret this if you take this assumption away. Can there be multiple? So you've heard of the Cambrian explosion. So this is when suddenly we find lots of fossils appearing of quite advanced life forms that remain to this day unchanged, particularly from that time.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain this in the understanding of small gradual change over time. So there was a professor called Gould who came up with a theory that something called punctuated equilibrium, where evolution becomes rapid development and then slows down and then rapid development. Now that was a mathematical theory. Gould was a mathematician, but he was trying to explain the fossil data, because the fossil data didn't fit with gradual. You couldn't see gradual evolution. You saw suddenly quite a well advanced life appearing in the Cambrian explosion. Yeah. So he came up with this theory. Now the theory explains the evolution, but what counters it is actually the genetic data. And why? Because in genes, what we understand is, and you've got to remember, Darwin was not aware of genes. He didn't know about them. This came after him. So his theory was, he would see all these creatures that looked similar, and he said they're probably related.
Yeah.
And that simple observation led to the idea that, well, maybe all of life came from something original, and he didn't know the mechanism of how it separated.
Yeah.
But he assumed that there was some way of these creatures evolving. Now, the assumption was, this unfalsified assumption is that that everything has a common ancestor. So any piece of data you get, so if I find a piece of fossil now, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh, this is all my trees, it doesn't fit into it anywhere. What am I going to do with that data? Either I say that there was a separate, subhanAllah, what's going on over? So either there was a separate line of evolution.
That's why you're on this side talking to us.
Yeah, way from whatever there is.
Sorry.
I'm just gonna sorry, brother. I have to just say something here. The reason we're having this talk about these certain topics is that for me, I like, again, with the divisiveness and sort of okay, we'll throw the idea of evolution out there, and then we're gonna say that evolution contradicts religion.
It doesn't.
That doesn't and you see what you know what? I don't understand why they're even if they're put out there, them being contradicting to a religion that I believe in or someone believes in, just straight out is one side. From one end is because whoever came up with the theory thinks this is a new theory with some evidence and put out there, etc. It's from he probably doesn't believe in whatever I believe in, but it's also there is like a lack of sort of finding ways to kind of merge these things together and explaining to someone who straight out says, okay, again with Adam, right? Sayyidina Adam. Again, the idea that I realized that, okay, some people thought, he's in heaven and then came down. There's some ambiguous, some...
I think there is a difference of opinion on this.
And I think, brother, one thing that we all do value truth, right? We value truth. We would like to find out, as to the best of our ability, as to where the truth lies. That's a noble cause. That's a noble goal, I think, And the Quran says something very interesting as well. If you speak the truth, provide your evidence. So it's not just about blind faith. So you've used the word divisive a few times. And I would say that these discussions can become divisive, but they don't have to be.
Yeah, of course.
So the sister can say, look, I'm a scientist and this is the evidence that perhaps convinces me of X or Y. It's perfectly okay. And the brother can say, okay, but let's have a look at that and we can discuss that. That's not a problem. And in fact, I think we should actually strive to do that.
Yeah, like for example,
because otherwise, you know what happens? Otherwise, we just bury things, and then these things sit with us, and we might have major doubts, and those doubts stay with us.
Exactly.
So it's good to have these discussions.
Of course,
So where do your thoughts lie on just evolution? So
I have no problem with evolution.
But do you believe that we and chimps used to have a common ancestor that split at some point throughout history? Because a lot of people, when I speak to, that are very religious, but without critical thought, just pure belief, really struggle with this ideology, and they take it offensively.
Yes.
So there's two things that when I see this, there's two things that I do. One is you look at the data, the evidence. So if you look at the studies that they did of these, so they say approximately 2 million years ago that there was a common ancestor for humans and chimps. and they're separated. And some of the evidence they say is that because if you look at chimps, they have 2 extra chromosomes than we do. And they say there was a merging of chromosomes 16 and 2, and you can see some evidence of this.
Yeah.
And the evidence they point to is at the ends of the chromosomes they have something called telomeres, which are a long chain of repeating DNA. And the idea is that this is something that breaks down with time and is linked to aging. If you see a section of this in the middle of a section of DNA where you don't normally find them, and they say this is evidence of the joining. So there's a couple of things. So when I am looking at this, I have two worldviews that I need to reconcile. One is I'm a Muslim. I establish for myself that there is a creator. This is the only reasonable explanation for the universe existing. So, for example, Allah says in the Quran, did the universe come from nothing or did it create itself? Rhetorical questions. Nothing can come from nothing. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is always 0. So it has to come from something. It can't make itself because it has to exist before it makes it. So it has to come from somewhere. So if there's something now, there always was something. If there's something now, there always was something. We can't have an infinite chain of anything. This is dependent upon this, dependent upon... We have to come to a point where we say there has to be something on the foundation. Like if you have a lake, there has to be a bottom, otherwise you'll never see the water. Yeah? So there has to be something foundational to existence for everything to exist. That foundational thing is, we would say, we would call that philosophically a necessary existence.
First cause.
First cause, the thing that everything else depends on. Allah says in Surah Al-Ikhlas, He is As-Samad, yeah? The one who everything needs but of himself has no need. This is literally the definition of a necessary thing. That foundation upon which everything else relies, yeah? So it's logical for me to assume that there is something foundational to the existence of the universe, and that thing has to be something that can bring about the universe.
Yeah.
Requires power. If we look at the intricacy, you mentioned how vast the universe was. Intricacy of the universe requires knowledge and precision, because we see precision in the universe. Then we see consciousness. Consciousness we can't reduce down to a material. We can't look in a microscope to see consciousness. Yeah. There are many theories put forward, but they're all lacking. The best thing is emergent, which just means it just came about, really. Now, I would say that if something doesn't have a quality, it can't give that quality. So non-consciousness, no matter what you do with it, cannot, however much you put together, never bring about consciousness.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have consciousness means that there was that this thing in the beginning, the necessary thing, was also conscious. So we have power. It can't be like the rest of the world, the rest of the universe. Immaterial, conscious, knowledgeable because of the intricacy. These are all sifat of Allah. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So I can come rationally to the conclusion that there has to be a creator who created this. But then when I look around at evidences, you see the Quran, you know about the linguistic nature of the Quran is very, very sublime.
Yeah.
You know, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were 5 of the greatest known Arab poets in history were alive.
You couldn't
They could not bring this.
I know, yeah.
You know this, subhanAllah, because in Arabic they have the bihar, yeah? The poetry with the different rhymes and meters.
Yeah.
16 of them. The Quran does not fit into any of them. And what makes it even more amazing is that the Prophet ﷺ was illiterate. Could not read or write. The Arabs, he had grown up amongst them, and they knew he was illiterate. And then he brings these words, they cannot match them. So there are many things about the Quran which make it for me convincing that this is from Allah, and you can come to this. Now, I have this one framework. Sorry, long answer. This is one framework. Then I have my other. I've been raised interested in the sciences, secular education. Everything is natural. All explanations have to be natural. And then assessing data in this way.
And how you would apply your medicine.
So this is how I apply my medicine. I give the medicine to someone who's ill.
On the natural world.
I believe that the shifa comes from Allah.
Yeah, of course.
Do you understand the reconciliation?
Of course.
Now, when it comes to this data of the human chimp genomes, etc., I've looked at the data. So you're not going to like this. I don't find it convincing. Why? Because if you look at the telomere length, how big are telomeres generally? Do you have an idea?
It depends. They decrease with age.
So if you take a creature, how long would you expect? How many thousands?
But it also depends on the efficiency of the telomeres within an organism.
Sure.
There's no one answer.
But they're usually very large.
At the beginning of birth, they are very large.
So when we look at
The telomeres of different organisms are different in length and efficiency of repair.
But if we're the way the data set works is we look at the current human genome and we look at the chimpanzee equivalent of what we think has merged, and because they come from the common ancestor, the assumption is they come from a common ancestor, then what you should find is the same number of base pairs as we see between the human beings. Even if you take a range controlled for age, so even if you vary the age and the telomere length that we see in that is very tiny, small amount, 150 base pairs or something, very, very tiny. That's one thing for me. The second thing is, you know, if you express it, what was your background? You said you were.
I'm a molecular biologist by training.
Perfect. You know this excellently. So what was if you have a chain of DNA, the DNA is when it produces proteins. It's just a language.
So every 3 base pairs are transcribed into a codon. Every codon is an amino acid, which translates into a protein.
A protein, yeah. So the idea is that this is information that gets translated to produce a protein. Yeah. If you a mutation is if there's like a deletion or an addition, so either the code is offset by one amino acid, something like this.
Yeah.
In this confusing of the telomeres, is any data taken away?
How do you mean?
Is any information removed?
But the telomeres are not coded.
No, not coding.
No.
So what's the answer to the question then? Is any information removed?
But the thing is, no one can really answer that question, because when you're thinking of humans and chimpanzees and you're saying they have a common ancestor, the only way we can formulate that argument is if you're assuming from that one common ancestor you had nothing until Homo sapiens and then you had nothing other than chimpanzees. Well, that's not really the case, because from that common ancestor there were many different branches of many different species.
I understand the theory. So the question I'm asking is really specific. If you join the telomeres of it doesn't matter which creature, any creatures, you join the telomeres of 2 chromosomes together, is there any deletion of information?
From the DNA, no.
Yeah. All of the information can still be expressed. Yes. So why would the creatures be different?
Because creatures on a protein level are not different. The proteins that is found in every cell in your body is found in every cell in a pig, in a cat, in a dog, and everything. The way the cellular machinery works is universal, even down to a bacteria, but they just have the structure differently. The difference is which part of the DNA is actually read. And even in your body, your skin cell, your blood cell, and your bone cell are reading different parts of the DNA. So that's why even within you will have different readings.
I understand. So the question again is if there's no data deleted, and remember we have on signals and off signals for reading a piece of DNA.
You and I are not following this now. Just letting the science.
You're too knowledgeable.
No, but
it's your thing.
All I'm doing is I'm looking at how I go about reconciling for myself that I don't find this personally convincing.
Okay.
There are many things. Now, one is that I have the understanding of my religious paradigm.
Yeah.
The second thing, I assume and I understand that there's an unfalsifiable foundation of Darwinian evolution, which is it assumes a common ancestor, irrespective of any way of falsifying it. You can't falsify that. Something that's not falsifiable, Karl Popper said that it shouldn't be counted as science. You're aware of Karl Popper. He was a...
Brother, can I ask a question here?
Please.
Because is it contradicting anything in religion, in Islam, because the idea of, again, back to what I was saying before, right? Even if came from where derivation, like at one point in time human beings evolved from another being or whatever, does it contradict in some?
So I'll tell you the different explanations I've come across in my time. So one is the commonly held that Adam alayhi salam has no predecessor. Yeah, this is one.
Predecessor.
Let me explain the differences. Yeah, so this is one of them. The other one is that, and the other extreme is that all of evolution as secularly understood by using the scientific method is the case, and the difference between Adam alayhi salam and the other creatures is a soul was infused, and this soul brings about the consciousness. It brings about the cultural changes we see about 50, 60,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We start to find art painting, paintings on the walls, and even that's going further back now, more than 100,000 years.
Something, yeah.
We start to see culture appearing, and that's we see cultivation of the land. This might be that. So that's one explanation, and the other one is an in between of the two. Yeah. The problem that I have.
There is another one as well, actually.
There's in between at the end.
Well, there's one where Adam is created fully formed, and the descendants of Adam somehow had DNA sharing with species that what they were able to mate with. Of course, this is not accepted generally
This is
within
between,
consensus, but the DNA traits that you find with Neanderthals and other species are therefore explained because there was some sharing of data of DNA later. But again, I must emphasize that generally this is not a good. So what I'm trying to say to you is that from the same data, from the same data, potentially you could come up with other theories, but science would never accept that and say that Adam was fully formed and that his descendants later somehow were able to share DNA with another species, and therefore they share their traits and the bacteria and everything else that we talk about. But sorry,
But the key thing is that we can't take something that's clear, we can't take that something clear and interpret in a way that's against that clearness. If there's something is ambiguous, because Allah specifically says that we created Adam with our own hands, we know that this was a different type of creation to other things.
Yeah.
We don't deny evolution, so 99.99% of evolution we have no issues with at all. But just a human being we believe is exception to this.
But can I ask a question? What would you say to the fact that maybe when God sent down the message, it couldn't explain, or he couldn't explain the evolution and the biological mechanisms
Who
behind
couldn't
it?
explain? God.
maybe he didn't want to, she's probably saying.
Maybe
Not that he
in
couldn't.
the message,
Okay.
it was just formulated in a way
So
where
people
people
will understand.
back then,
Yeah.
with their scientific knowledge, could just understand
At that
how
time,
humans
yeah.
came about.
But sister, can I just ask you a question? Because you're a scientist, right? Clearly, this description of Adam being created without any prior creation, simply willed Adam to existence.
From nothing.
Would science ever be able to explore or really comment on a supernatural event?
That's
Because it's unscientific. It's not
outside of the
science. It's
paradigm.
outside of science. What I'm trying to say to you.
But I think the definition
or
of
the miracles, or the miracles of any of the prophets, right?
No.
You're not. You don't take. Listen,
I'm not
you're
going
not
back
taking
home
my
today.
advice.
I'm not going
Discussion is
back
about
home.
my
You're not
favorite.
taking my advice,
Yeah,
right?
I
You're
know.
going to be in big trouble when you get out of here.
It's all Arabic
Yeah?
from now on.
She's saying exactly. She's holding herself like, out there. It's all going to change. I'm telling you,
No,
right?
but so the borders of science, I think they're not as determined as people would like them, as you would like to think.
Do
right?
you know
So-
what I believe, sister? To be honest with you,
Yeah.
right? I think from a scientific paradigm, the best explanation that we have is human chimp ancestry. From a scientific paradigm. So if you were to tell me, explain it from a non-theological sense, without miracles, without anything else, I would say that's the strongest theory.
Okay.
Because that's what it seems to be the only possibility,
Assuming
right?
naturalism.
Assuming naturalism is true and there's no other explanation. But as Imran is trying to explain to you is that there are certain things that we believe are supernatural and fall outside of that box,
You can't measure them.
which you have no yardstick now to measure.
Yeah.
That's the magic word, yardstick.
Using the tool of science, because science is based on philosophical naturalism. In other words, there is nothing that falls out of a natural explanation. Even quantum physics, we might not understand where these particles come from,
Yeah.
but we will never, even if we never find out, will we ever come to a point where we'll say it's a miracle? No, we'll simply say, in the future, there might be some evidence or experimentation where we will gain the explanation as to where those particles seem to pop in and out of,
Wait,
right?
yes and no, because so if you think of the visible spectrum, right?
Yes.
What people can see, it's
Yes.
the wavelength from 450 up until 650 nanometers.
I'll take your word for it.
But if you look at the full spectrum of waves,
Yes.
what we can see
Yeah, it's very
is
narrow.
a very,
Very,
tiny
very,
narrow
I agree.
window.
I
So
agree.
a lot of times I think humans, we want to explain things,
Yes.
but we don't take into account our
Limitations.
own limitations.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Like take a
Absolutely.
whistle of a dog.
Absolutely.
You can whistle. You can't hear
Yeah,
it,
but
but
he
a dog
can.
can hear
Absolutely.
it. So who's to say there are things
Absolutely.
that we will never be able to
Yes.
understand?
Yes.
We agree on
that
this.
we will
yeah.
just define as miracles because
Yes.
we can't find them, but that doesn't mean
Yeah.
there isn't laws governing them.
No, but
It
what I'm,
just means we
what I'm
can't
trying to
get them.
explain to you is from a scientific paradigm. Even let's say if particles popping in and out of what we perceive to be non-existence,
Yeah.
even if that is the case, that they simply pop in and out of we don't know from where and how, and we never realize the reality of how that happens, I'm saying science will still reserve its
We'll
judgment
assume it's a natural
and
cause, we don't
assume that it is a
Not
natural.
really. I think this is a very sort
Science
of
is a
generalized.
tool and it has its limits.
No, I think scientists are not that narrow-minded because by definition you're always open to interpretation. It's the same thing as, like, for example, quantum entanglement.
Yes.
Einstein
Yes.
famously said something spooky happening
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
distance.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there is an awareness and an acceptance that
Yeah.
there are things we cannot
Which
understand.
happen faster than the speed of light, right?
Yeah,
You've got
there
two
are
particles
things
at either side of the universe.
beyond our
Yeah, and they both
understanding.
react at the same time, right?
And
SubhanAllah,
yes,
it's amazing, right?
Historically,
Yeah.
science has been functioning by having very rigid limitations, saying,
Yes.
no, if we can't quantify it, it's not true.
Yeah.
But I think that has fundamentally
No, I'm not
changed the
arguing
law.
against that, what you just said. What I'm trying to explain to you is that even like quantum entanglement, if you have two particles at the electrons at the end of the universe, 13.8 billion light years across, and when you agitate or you activate one,
That
the other reacts
reacts.
immediately,
Yeah.
instantaneously,
Yeah.
right? Which would then go against Einstein's theory of light, right? Speed of light, right? What I'm trying to explain to you is that if science never, managed to unravel that riddle, all I'm saying to you is that it would still assume that there was a naturalistic explanation to that, and that we just haven't found it what it could be.
Yet.
Yes.
Yeah, but
you know what?
yet, that concept, I'm not saying is, I'm saying from a scientific paradigm, or from let's say, an open-minded paradigm, it could indeed be a miracle. It could be, but it will never be accepted as such. It will always be an assumption that there's a naturalistic explanation. We just don't know it. And that could happen even in 1,000,000 years if we live that long, right?
But could I then ask you, can a miracle be defined as something that has a naturalistic explanation, but we
No.
don't understand?
A miracle is something that's outside of a natural. That's what makes it a miracle.
Scientism. So scientism is the.
I'm going to go and pray.
You're gonna rock us, right?
So I won't be interrupting anymore.
So scientism is this assumption that science is the only route to knowledge,
Yes.
which is fundamentally
Give you a shot.
flawed as a concept,
thank you.
because there are many things that science cannot establish. So
Yet.
no, can't establish. Let's take something simple.
Okay.
Pain. Does pain exist?
Yes, it's a chemical reaction in a body.
How is it?
It's a chemical reaction in a body, but the thing is, pain is a tricky one because we don't understand how the brain works yet.
But how do we assess pain?
Well, today by inflammation to a certain degree and by feelings.
We ask someone,
Yeah.
Are you in
how
pain?
much pain are you in?
Between 1 and 10.
And I've seen people who've come in with a broken leg and they've been walking on it for 2 weeks, and someone with a paper cut and rolling around the floor like they've been shot, And so it's very subjective.
Yeah.
But the only way to assess pain, the degree of pain, the only way to assess it is a subjective experience. I have to ask you, brother, how much pain
You
are
can't
in?
measure it,
You can't
basically.
measure it.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the tools yet to measure
Sure.
it.
But
No, you
isn't it-
can't measure it.
Yet.
That's all right.
This is science.
Because we don't understand the brain.
You have great
You
demand in
can't measure,
science.
you can't measure death, you can't measure concepts. They have no dimension, they have no weight. The metaphysical or theological has no physical existence, maybe an emergent quality of the brain, but itself is not material to understand. Do you know what I mean?
So what this is the people say that you've heard of science, you've heard of God of the gaps. You've heard of this God of the gaps. So this is where if there's no explanation of why something is happening that we understand.
Yeah.
In the old days, the people superstition you say, "Oh, God did this." Why is the thunder happening, lightning happening?
So they just fill
God
the
is angry.
unknown with,
They fill the
with
unknown.
God, basically,
So what's
for
happening
everything.
here is we're seeing the reverse now.
Oh, I get
not just you, we other people. They're filling the unknown with science of the gaps.
Yeah, okay.
Eventually, we will come to that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a level of principle. There's a principle level where we can't reduce consciousness to the conscious experience. So we can measure neurological activity.
Yeah.
We can measure neurons firing.
Yeah.
There's no way to know what that would mean until we speak to someone and ask them, was this fear or was this excitement?
Yeah, consciousness was a big question.
Science is just the observation of what the laws of nature is and turning it into something that, based on some mathematical and some pieces of the puzzle fitting together, and then having general.
That's on the scientism thing. So the scientism thing is when you assume that this is the only route to knowledge. Yeah. And the first people to do this were the logical positivists in, I think, the 1920s and 30s. Auguste Comte was the first one of these that he proposed this. He said that because they found science useful. So science brought about technology, it brought about benefits in the society. So it's assumed that this is the only way to really understand reality and truth. Yeah. So there was a concerted effort to try and bring this idea forward that science is. Now the problem with that is that there's lots of things that it can't do because it's a tool. It has a framework. It has limitations. Yeah. But because we're raised in a secular way and there's a big emphasis on the scientific endeavor. And science is really compelling. I mean, I'm a scientific background. I love doing science. I'm interested in it. I like experiments. But what we do is then I was similar. I fell into this idea that science is the only way.